going after us regarding that, because unfortunately the world thinks that we are a terrorist nation, whereas the Indians are the victims. It's the other way around. They are terrorists and we are the victim nation. We have lost more than 83,000 people, just imagine. But it's very, very unfortunate, but I hope that sanity prevails at the end of the day. All right, Imran, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you, and thank you so much, Rivesa. But definitely we'll be doing another show soon, perhaps this week or maybe the next, regarding this Hindu ecosystem. Now, that is a new phenomena that has been developed by the extremist Hindus and the Indians, and it's all over India and perhaps in certain major countries as well, where there is a good decent number of Indians living. And what they are trying to do is something which is going to, in fact, honestly speaking, surprise you to a level that we never thought on those lines. And look what they are up to. Supported by the BJP government, financed by the BJP government, so many groups have been created. People are just are told to come and join those groups and build up narratives. Now, this is exactly how the soft power is being used in India. But anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.
Islamabad, the capital city, bustles with politicians and business activity. It stretches out around the foothills of the Margalas. To many, Islamabad is just that, lush green views in a modern, urbanized capital that houses politicians, diplomats and the Pakistani elite. But it is while driving through the stucco gate that the line between urbanization and traditionalism blurs us into an eclectic blend of the past and the present. The alleyways that bend through the village hold remnants of a rather colorful, regal history. A tourist site today, the village was once a garden resort known for its natural springs. The historical significance of the city of Islamabad is unknown to many, and for this reason, the Capital Development Authority preserved Saidpur, a Mughal-era village located within the capital city. Through the periods of history that Saidpur has existed, it has been influenced by civilizations such as the Gandhara, Greek, Buddhist, Mughal, Ashoka and British colonialism. Saidpur village is said to be 300 years old, but the elders argue it is even older than most believe it to be. Saidpur's name originates from Sultan Said Khan. He was the son of the Ghakkar chief of the Potohar region during Mughal Emperor Babur's reign, Sultan Sarang Khan. The village was gifted by Sultan Said Khan to his daughter, who married the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, the son of Emperor Akbar.
मैं शांति से पैदा हुआ, इस गांव का नाम सैदपुर था। उस पहले जो नाम था वो राजा सैद खान हमारा बड़का था। उसने इलाका फतह किया उस दिन फतेहपुर बावली नाम था, गुरुद्वारा भी था, मस्जिद भी थी। हम लोगों के साथ एक दूसरे के साथ प्यार करते थे।
Later, the village was recognized as the pilgrimage site by the Hindu commander Raja Man Singh. In 2006, the CDA began remodeling project of the Saidpur village. The French government provided technical assistance in the remodeling procedure. The purpose of the preservation project was to give visitors a taste of the multicultural, multifaceted heritage of Pakistan. The initial cost of this cultural project at the time was estimated at 400 million rupees. French ambassador Régis de Bellonnet was very supportive of this initiative and invited French architect Max Bois-Robert. Bois-Robert gave his expertise to develop remodeling methods that would not only give the necessary modern upgrades, but also preserve the natural impact of the village. Extensive preservation work was done to restore historical sites such as the Hindu Mandir and Sikh Gurdwara. Mud houses were given an uplift to improve aesthetics. Workers toiled to conserve the traditional atmosphere by restoring stone walls and adding haystacks and horse-drawn carts. Today, Saidpur preserves the historical face of the Potohar region. Boasting old rural roots with a modern edge, Saidpur is a manifestation of the transition Pakistan is making in developing both economically and socially. Saidpur historically was a village settled by craftspeople. Today, the present generations have continued the legacy of their forefathers and kept their art alive in the form of handiwork.
ये जो बर्तन बनाने वाला काम है, मैं 10 साल का था उस वक्त काम शुरू किया है। इस वक्त मेरी 50 साल उम्र हो गई है यही काम करते करते। सैदपुर में 6 खानदान सारे यही गुजर गए काम करते करते। तो ये गांव इसी ट्रेन की वजह से मशहूर है। मिट्टी की ट्रेन जो बनी है ये 120 साल पुरानी है।
I think that it's amazing that they have restaurants here now, but they've still kept that, that original look, and the village is still there, and the people get to do something, contribute, just help the economy. I think it's great.
These doors, these windows are antique. They are rustic and beautiful.
The place is so beautiful, and according to architecture, according to designing, according to painting, all the people of Pakistan should visit this place.
Visitors can take in lush green views and pay visits to historical sites such as the Nomad Art Gallery, Old Sufi Tomb, the Hindu Temple and the Sikh Gurdwara. Many popular restaurants and cafes also line the entrance of the village to cater to the palate of visitors, with tantalizing local cuisines sure to stimulate anybody's taste buds. Preservation projects such as these uphold our heritage and establish our footprint in history. These places are our cultural assets, and we should take pride in the richness of Pakistani history. Saidpur is a must-see for all Pakistanis and foreigners alike. The world over, many have spoken for Pakistan, but it is these voices that tell the true story of this beautiful country. It is these places that echo the tales untold. There is much to discover to capture the true face of Pakistan.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Rida Shah live from the Islamabad studios with the headlines at 9 p.m. Prime Minister Imran Khan proposes 5-point agenda to tackle global challenges confronted by agriculture sector through boosting infrastructure, introducing technology and increasing quality of seeds. Thus, Pakistan is fully implementing sustainable development goals to reduce poverty and hunger through a SARS program. Prime Minister Imran Khan terms deforestation a lifesaver for future of Pakistan. Says the government is firm to make the country green considering its vulnerability to climate change. Federal Cabinet decides to expedite work on introducing electronic voting system for the overseas Pakistanis. Information Minister Shibli Farrukh says President Dr. Arif Alvi is chairing the committee on the voting rights to the overseas Pakistanis. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi calls on Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo and briefs on Pakistan's shifting focus from geopolitics to geoeconomics. Prime Minister Imran Khan directs to introduce legislation on issue of missing persons, says Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid. In Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, complete strike observed today to register protests against the visit of a selected European parliamentary group arranged by Indian authorities to mislead the international community about the ground situation of the territory. Ferocious winter weather sweeping across large parts of the central and southern United States has brought record-breaking cold temperatures, left millions without power, and killed more than 20 people across multiple states. The wait is over. Cricket lovers, get ready. The sales of online tickets for the PSL 6th edition starts as the month-long event is going to start at the National Stadium, Karachi on Saturday. Well, those were the headlines. For more details and live streaming, log on to our website world.ptv.com.pk. You can find us on our Facebook page with the name of PTV World and follow us on Twitter at WorldPTV. This is Rida Shah signing off for now.
In the era of global news coverage, we aim to tell the truth. Through meticulous discussions and in-depth analyses about stories that matter the most. We underline key events as and when they happen. Watch Newsroom with me, Umar Khalid Khan, for a daily roundup of the latest international and local top stories.
What is the real Pakistani society about? What are our beliefs and what are our aspirations? Reflecting the true picture of our otherwise misunderstood Pakistani society. Reality versus perception. Where do we see our place in the global society? Join me, Fatma Shaheen, in rediscovering the real Pakistani society.
welcome to Politics. Today I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Today we are going to talk about economics of the country. One news that is important is Pakistan is back in the IMF program. We never left, but because of COVID there was suspension of the nitty-gritties of the program. And now, in principle, through a virtual meeting, Pakistani side and IMF team have actually sorted things out, and they are going to actually move forward. As a result, Pakistan gets 500 million, and apart from that, Pakistan has to carry out certain reforms in the country, and we have been talking about structural reforms that are necessitated or demanded by the IMF. Now, whether in this climate, when the economy is already facing a lot of hardships, will it be possible or not? And then there are economic aspects which are very important. Pakistan has not been able to move out of the grey list of FATF. We are going to talk about that as well, and we are going to ask what exactly is the nature of economic reform right now and how we are sailing so far. We are going to talk about all these things and more. In order to help us understand these issues in the studio, I am joined by Fahim Sardar Sahab, who is Senior Policy Specialist, Non-Traditional Security, Strategic Policy Planning Cell, National Security Division. Quite a mouthful, eh? Thank you very much for being part of the program. My second guest is Abid Hassan Saab, who is former Operations Advisor, World Bank. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. And Dr. Abid Qayyum Salari also joins us. You have seen him on Pakistani television channels regularly. He is an economist, but also member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Dr. Abid Qayyum Salari, let me start with you and let me ask you, where do you think Pakistani economy is at right now, and what are the requirements of IMF's package, sir?
Farrukh, when we talk of Pakistan's economy in the times of COVID, like anywhere else in the world, one can safely say that it's a selective recovery. Certain sectors of economy, they have recovered well. They're showing their resilience, bouncing back. However, there are certain other sectors which are not bouncing back that smoothly, and certain others which are perhaps in deep trouble. So this is a trend everywhere, and that is true for Pakistan. But the sectors which matters for IMF program, and if you look at the joint statement released by at the staff mission and Pakistani authorities, they have shown satisfaction on number of measures, and those measures include State Bank of Pakistan's measures, not only the monetary easing, but also various fiscal stimulus. They have also shown satisfaction on foreign exchange reserves. They have shown satisfaction on net international reserves. They have shown satisfaction on current account and especially a slight improvement in exports, considerable reduction in imports. So these are some of the measures which mattered to IMF when we are talking of Pakistan's economy. And then there are certain other structural and regulatory benchmarks which we can talk as the program proceeds.
Right. Since you brought up Pakistan's recovery, and especially you mentioned one word that has become, or one term that has become a buzzword in Pakistan's discourse, is current account deficit or current account. Usually it seems that every government actually ends up talking about one thing more than others. And previous government we saw used to talk about dollars price, and now we are talking about a current account. But do you think that regarding other deficits, Pakistan is really performing well?
Well, Farrukh, we are still passing through those uncertain times. So COVID-19, although we escaped from first wave, we are braving the second wave. But there are lots of ifs and buts in 2021 too. Not only recovery in Pakistan and vaccination in Pakistan, but also recovery, both health and economic recovery in our partner countries. So depending how these things unfold, we would find out that whether 2021 we should have focused more on COVID recovery, or we could have done better. Certainly there is always room for improvement, but looking back, I think I'm quite satisfied when I, especially on this smart lockdown policy and
Dr. Sulleri, as we move forward, we are going to talk about that as well. Let me bring in Abid Hassan Saab. Sir, your take on the state of economy, what to expect from the IMF's conditionalities, and how we are faring so far.
Yes, I think, it's a good sign that the program has been resumed and there is an understanding on what reforms need to be undertaken in the coming months and years. Having said that, an economy, imagine, is a car with 4 wheels, right? And so car only moves forward when all the wheels move forward in the same direction.
Right.
And unfortunately, Pakistan, and I don't say just Pakistan, many developing countries, they move in different directions. So either they move in different, if you think of the 4 wheels as the political system, the government, the judicial system, and the security establishment, you can kind of visualize a car in that framework, or you can, in our case, visualize the car with the 4 wheels are the main provinces.
Okay.
So, IMF or no IMF, unless we get our own act together, where, as much as possible, the 4 wheels in the same direction, move in the same direction, we will never get out of this boom bust cycle, or this, 2 months are good, 3 months are bad. And so, what we need to, as a society, as a state, go beyond this kind of IMF stuff.
Right.
As to
we
how do we ensure
we need to do that. Dr. Abid Hassan Saab, let me ask you another very important question. I'm intrigued by your simile about a car. I'm sure that you were simplifying. This country has far too many variables, not just 4 variables or tires. But regardless, I get what you're saying. Sir, regarding fiscal deficit, I understand that remittances have gone up by 24% in many months. But regarding fiscal deficit, sir, do you think that we are in an uncomfortable position right now?
Oh, absolutely. We've been in an uncomfortable position, and Abid Sulleri, would kind of support what I'm saying, for maybe 3 decades. Some years, okay, you do well, but fundamentally, there are 2 areas that this country, Pakistan, has simply failed in maybe over 3-4 decades. One is the fiscal side, and the other is exports. I think we've simply not been able to benefit from globalization in the past 3-4 decades. And even now, I think, yes, that's okay, every month you see some improvement in the export, but there is a fundamental anti-export bias in this country. And until that is kind of addressed head on, we will muddle through on this export side. And similarly on the fiscal, on tax reform, I think we're just muddling along. Okay, sometimes we're lucky and there's a bit more collection of tax here, there, and the other. But fundamental tax reforms are missing. And also on the fiscal side, equally important is fundamental expenditure reforms. Yes,
and
this government
has been able to move forward. We are going to talk about expenditure reform as well, because there is a lot of discussion on PSEs that one has to actually take into account. But let me go to the guest who is in the studio, patiently waiting for his turn. Fahim Sardar Saab, your take on the state of economy, and do you think, are we out of the woods yet?
It's a very tough question, but there is an answer to it. Yeah. Firstly, the economy has recovered, and it has not done as badly as many other countries, as we know. Pakistan's GDP went down by 0.4%, as we know. However, if we look at what happened in India, and we've all been through these numbers many times, even in the region, things have been pretty bad. So not to blame everything on COVID, most of it we should sort of accept for ourselves.
Yeah.
That
Even before COVID, the economy was shrinking.
yes, it was because we had a high interest rate environment, which I think I spoke of in your program the last time I came, which has been a while. So the point is that
now the interest rates have gone down, and that doesn't affect our current account.
No, it does. It does help your economy. You see, there are 2-3 things that
it helps economy, but it adversely affects the current account. Does it not?
I was just coming to that. When your economy is given room to breathe, when it's given room to work like other economies, what happens is you start generating more revenue. You start generating internal and external revenue. So that basically brings in a positive pressure onto your twin deficits. What we need to do in Pakistan right now, and which the government is trying to do, is to structurally reform what's happening in Pakistan. The piping, and there's some hemorrhage that needs to be fixed. What is IMF saying? IMF is talking about structural reforms. Forgive me for repeating what we already know and what we've been hearing. There's a reason that IMF keeps talking about structure. There is a reason that every government eventually starts to talk about structure, because there is hemorrhage. There's cash hemorrhage, there's non-cash hemorrhage.
Right.
So right now with Pakistan, when we talk about the economy has started to turn positively. It has come out of a very bad COVID situation. You take 2.5 trillion, the government says 2, but I think probably 2 to 2.5 trillion has been the hemorrhage that we had to face because of COVID. But having said that, the economy has done far better than it could have.
But the question then is whether this recovery, it might be great, but is it good enough for the people? Is it good enough for the kind of reforms we need? And I understand that you are saying that the IMF keeps on talking about the structure, but with due respect, IMF has been at it for 50 years.
Good point.
We don't actually pull that kind of miracle off. So what is changing this time?
Adding to what you're saying, actually, and I'm going to say something very iconoclastic here, you don't need the IMF to grow, to be very honest, okay? If you've got your own house in order, if your piping is in order, if your hemorrhage is down to a bare minimum, you don't need an IMF or some external party always telling you what needs to be done. Point number 2, coming back to what you said about, is this good enough? No, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Pakistan eventually needs to grow at 6% plus every single year. And we're talking about real growth. We're not talking about cosmetic growth, which comes from consumption and credit and all that. We've been through that. Right now, what the government appears to be doing, and we have sufficient evidence to say that the government is doing this, it's focusing on structure. It's focusing on reducing costs. It's focusing on trying to...
You'll have to qualify. How is the government focusing on structures?
Okay, now the government is trying...
What is the government doing about CSEs?
Well, very simply, the government appears to be offloading what is a white elephant.
Okay. So has the government offloaded any recently?
Not right now, because it's going to take time. These things require feasibilities, and I'm speaking from my corporate hat.
Right.
Whenever you go...
And I request you keep actually that hat rather than the other one.
I'm trying.
We already have representation from the government. Right?
Whenever you have to buy or sell an asset, you have to establish its value, which is then seen with its price. Now, when we talk about, let's say, the Pakistan steel mills, when we talk about other projects, when we talk about the distribution companies, it's a long process just to even get through the feasibility. So the government is on it. The only thing right now that needs to be done is to have a continued approach.
Yeah, but again, I'm still waiting for the examples of offloading. But before I do that, let me ask Dr. Sadlari about something very important. Sir, I understand that everything about Pakistani economy starts and ends with the mention of structural reform. But sir, first, the concern of the common man, the inflationary pressure. It seems that the government does quite a lot, but somehow the inflation still is not in control. What is your take on that?
Yes, it's certainly not in control. Due to 2 reasons. One, of course, COVID-19, it has eroded the purchasing capacity and purchasing power of not only lower income earners but also middle income earners, and in some cases upper middle income earners too.
No, but
and
that with due respect would drive the cost low because less people are buying. That is not happening. The price is actually going up and up every day.
It's not a demand pull inflation. If you look at the prices of food items, if they are increasing, those are perishable commodities, and we don't have a storage system to store them when they are abundant in supply. Then, of course, the prices of imported commodities, and especially palm oil, when it will increase, the prices of cooking oil will increase in Pakistan. When your OPEC basket, the price of crude, that would surpass $60 per barrel, and today is $62 per barrel. Of course, you will have to increase your fuel cost in Pakistan too. And previously, I think less people comparatively before COVID, they were facing the heat of all this price inflation, which was mandatory and not at all demand push. All of these commodities, those are essential commodities. But now, as I mentioned, that we need to understand that COVID did affect economy. If our economy shrank last year, it would have affected the purchasing power of citizens, and that is getting reflected. I think
right. There is a reason, Dr. Sidleri, I asked you about this question, this issue. That is that every time we talk to IMF, we are told that we have to do more, right? And one consequence of that is that you have to cut subsidies wherever they are. And the problem is every time we keep on doing that, inflation further goes up. So what exactly should the people of Pakistan be expecting this time?
Yes, sir, this time, okay, what the people of Pakistan should be expecting, I think for Pakistan, this post-Senate election period would be very important for IMF negotiations. So far, many of the legislations that IMF had asked us to do, be it state bank autonomy or giving more power to regulators, the power regulators or oil and gas regulators, government could get away with them because it didn't have the majority in upper house. The same is the case for state-owned enterprises. But after Senate election, once government would be in a comfortable position in both houses, of course, it will not be able to use this excuse that in Senate it doesn't have a majority and it couldn't do legislation. So one thing that I can foresee after Senate election, that IMF would pressurize on these legislative reforms.
Right. And the price of commodities will go up or down, sir?
Price of commodities, those would remain, I think, volatile, especially the perishable commodities.
Right. Let me ask Dr. Abid Hassan also to actually step in. Sir, regarding these aspects, are we, inbound for further inflation in this country? And to an extent that we are going to, the common people is going to suffer a lot?
Yes and no. I mean, the thing is, look, let's take one sector or one thing at a time. Let's look at power sector. Our bills are continue to increase, right?
Right.
And why do they increase? Because, okay, we had bad contracts, fuel prices gone up. And those two things, in one thing government has tried to renegotiate, which is good, but the impact is, kind of minimal when you look at the per unit cost. Fuel price, the government has no basic control. It's determined by the rest of the world. And the third thing is theft, right? Now, I mean, this whole system loss reduction SLR program has been on for, I don't know, 3 decades, ever since I started working on Pakistan in the late 90s. Point is, if you're serious, right, by now you should have fired every CEO of a disco. I mean, you go to the people and say, look, I really can't control the electricity price, but I fired everyone because I want to, what I can control, I'm trying to do.
Okay.
So when you increase electricity price and you see every disco CEO, every disco has system loss of 15%, 10%, 8%, 20%. So the citizen rightfully says, hey, listen, why are you sticking it to me for your incompetence?
Right.
So I don't see any
but
movement.
with due respect, regarding this suggestion of firing all the CEOs of discos, sir, won't it be superficial? Because the actual problem lies with the disco itself rather than the head of the disco.
When you fire a manager, you fire a few chief engineers, you fire a few XCNs, you fire a few STOs. The point is, you have to hold people accountable for bad governance. At least federal government owns these entities. If it can't hold the entity employees or senior management for bad governance, then of course we will see prices continue to rise. That's point one. Secondly, look, this whole OGRA, and Abid was saying legislation on strengthening regulatory institutions. When I was working for the World Bank here, OGRA was established. At that point, it was very clear that the prices movement would be automatic. There were formulas. International price goes up, petroleum prices go up. International prices go down, petroleum prices go down. The first one to come in when Jamali was the Prime Minister, and he wanted prices were going up. He said, no, keep it down. And somebody said, hey, listen, I mean, the law doesn't allow. And he said, oh, I am the Prime Minister of this country. You can have any number of laws. For example, recently, when OGRA has said prices should go up, that's what the regulator has. The government says no. Right. So when you interfere in markets, you interfere in sugar market, you interfere in wheat market, you interfere in other markets, you end up in a situation where at the end of the day, it's the consumers that get hit because of your incompetence, because you're mismanaging, because either you're over-regulating, under-regulating, and then when you can't control it, you put the police on it, price control committee.
I'm glad that you have brought up the issue of intervention in the markets. And that seems to be a big concern because there is cartelization, and we have seen that when the government announced to reduce the prices of fuel products, all of a sudden fuel disappeared from the market. Similarly, sugar, similarly other aspects. You are arguing for a situation where the government does not actually intervene too much. And my question is that then it brings us back to the neoclassical model where actually IMF and international bodies keep on arguing that markets should be a self-regulatory body, and that actually ends up creating more misery, sir.
Look, Farrukh, even in the US, they have a Federal Trade Commission which looks at cartels and all, and they send people to jail. They close down companies. The AT&T was broken up because of antitrust. The point is, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be regulation, that there shouldn't be, let's say, a competition commission, right? How many people, firms have been fined 1,000 rupees? When you fine a firm 1 billion rupees for cartel, you send the CEO or somebody to jail because they met in a closed room and decided that cement prices should be this, sugar prices should be this, or car prices this. If you do not take action, then you can't blame, some IMF or neo-colonialism or neoliberalism and this, that, and the other. Markets have to be regulated, but not the way typically South Asia, our psyche, our DNA is a control type DNA, not in that fashion. They have to be regulated smartly.
There has to be a smart regulation, the regulatory regime that is important. That point is well made, sir. Although I didn't bring up neocolonialism, I was just mentioning neoliberalism, right? But both are quite different. Fahim Saab, since we are talking about various aspects, now let me ask you, what are the engines of growth right now you see as great opportunity or opportunity providers in the economy right now? Construction sector, what else?
Construction is there. We've seen what's the recovery.
Because of the government's very enabling package that was offered to the construction industry.
It's not that expensive for the government to enable, let's say, the construction sector. You have IT, you have you have to focus on services, you have to start focusing on industry, you have to, once again, and I hate to say this, you have to focus again on textiles, because textiles really need to pull up their socks.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is that let's just go back to the basics.
Okay.
Let's go back to the basics, and that's where the solution lies. What IMF says to you, what ADB says to you, what the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is going to say to you, that's all wonderful. Let's just keep it to one side. If we are able to manage our demands and supplies in all various sectors, your prices are stabilized.
What do you mean by manage? Because at this moment, to take care of current account, we have slapped import duties on various items.
That's fair enough. I mean, I think that's part of the trade mechanism. We are well within
not
our...
only us, India also did exactly
Everyone
the same
does
thing.
it. Everyone does it.
But the problem is that you're saying that you have to balance demand and supply, right?
True, because
And we don't manufacture everything.
no, hang on, let's just go back to what you just said. Balancing out does not mean that you have to sort of control it.
Okay.
Right now, what is Pakistan facing right now? A supply shortage in various basic commodities.
Okay.
Now, when you talk about basic wheat, basic food, basic cotton, there's a supply shortage for various reasons. I won't get into that.
In basic commodities.
Yeah. So when demand and supply get sort of out of whack, that's where the price goes out of whack. That's where the government sometimes has a knee-jerk reaction. But what I'm saying is, okay, fine, that's been done. We can just go back to the basics, and we have to reestablish the demands and supplies. I'm sorry I'm using pearls on purpose. Of all major sectors that cause inflation and cause growth. Because the moment you bring in stability, and I'm choosing my words very carefully, you have to bring in stability. Every country does this. Why are we so shy of saying this? We have to bring
So
in...
we are still stuck at a stage where we are working on macroeconomic stabilization?
No, that would be a separate point. If I can plagiarize what Dr. Suleri used earlier, that we're not out of the woods yet. We're going through a transitionary phase where we realigned a lot of our basic economic machinery, the cogs and the wheels, and we've actually tried to change the oil as well. Right now, what Pakistan needs to do is, when you identify certain key growth sectors, which are multiplier sectors like construction, IT, services, tourism, these are all multiplier sectors. Even textile, I would dare say, because we rely so much on textile, they have to be allowed to grow continuously. And not just them, the ones that I've named, there's a much bigger list. Once you allow them to grow, give them a few months to grow, that will start the revenue generation process that the government is looking at. That is the final goal.
Okay.
Sometimes we get stuck in the semantics. Sometimes we get stuck in the details, which we forget the eventual goal. We talk about the goal.
Forest forwards.
Yeah. So we just need to get to the goal first.
Okay.
Then come back to the nitty-gritty, and coming back to that slapping of duties, and all those, or not all regulatory duties are allowed, but staying within the WTO framework. Pakistan is well within its rights to disallow certain
no,
imports.
but I'm not talking about rights. I'm talking about the economy and the demand side, right?
Not all imports are necessary. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, but that depends on how do you actually look at things, right?
Sure.
The pet owners will talk about pet food, right, as a necessary commodity. There are others who will say that human beings are actually suffering, and what exactly are we going to do? Dr. Abid Karim Sildari, now that we have talked about so many aspects of it, where is the government at regarding structural reforms? What we might have fixed and what we can fix in the coming days?
As I said, that this post-Senate election, that would be a decisive moment. So far, one had to give allowance to federal government because PTI didn't have this majority registration was not possible. Now, of course, after that excuse would not be there. So, government would have to keep on pursuing and following its agenda of this reforms in structural reforms, but this transition cost, that should not be borne by common person, and for that matter universal social protection, and for that matter other social safety nets and social protection programs and targeted subsidies. I think those need to be pursued.
Right, and public sector enterprises, what do you think the government plans to do with them?
Sorry. Government is actually already started taking actions in case of steel mills.
Right.
If you see the workers, those have been. I'm sorry.
Right. I'm going to come back to you, sir. Let me bring in Abid Hassan Saab as well. Abid Saab, your take on structural reform, particularly public sector enterprises, sir. I know that at the start government was thinking about many models, Khazana model for that matter, many others. But now it seems that we are focusing basically on reforming governance in those bodies. Is it correct, sir?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I was about to say that. Look, I mean, the government initially was totally confused. You know, when you try to implant things which work in Singapore or Malaysia, you forget the context. What works there is unlikely to work here, right? So, for a year or two, we were pursuing that model. We appointed super boards, and then, of course, suddenly somebody realized, oh my God, the same going to work in Pakistan. The thing is, look, if you are wishy-washy about a certain objective, then it never gets achieved. And why do I say wishy-washy? You know, I mean, I don't want to talk about the other parties. I mean, you know, there was a party whose leader was totally bent upon privatizing public enterprises. Right?
Okay.
So, I mean, if the leadership is committed to something, then it won't happen. Then there'll be excuses. We don't have majority in Senate. We don't have this legislation. Look, if you have a conviction and you have the courage to go out and articulate what you want to do, things get done. Otherwise, they won't. I'm not holding my breath on this privatization because I don't think the current government is really. Yes, they will write all sorts of, make speeches and agree with the fund and so on and so forth. But if it hasn't happened in the last 2.5 years, I don't see it happening in the next 2.5 years. Right. Admittedly, right. These are difficult transactions, you know, and as your other guest was talking about feasibility, well, we've done feasibilities of FESCO and LESCO and MEPCO and ISCO privatization year after year. We paid IFC several $1 million several times over for such feasibilities. So the thing is, look, I mean, you cannot, it's like trying to walk on eggs and hoping they don't break.
Okay.
Some eggs will have to break. Right. You have to have the courage to go out and articulate to the citizens why some things are necessary. And then right. Just do it.
And particularly, you have to break some eggs if you want to make an omelette. Before I come back to Fahim Sardar Saab, let me go back to Dr. Nehri. Dr. Saab, earlier you were talking about the pace of reforms. Regarding privatization, because you twice you brought up the Senate elections and you talked about majority in the bicameral system, the two houses at the center. Question is, how much legislation does the government need to do to privatize various public sector enterprises?
Well, you see, for example, in case of Pakistan Steel Mill, you might have seen that half of the workforce is already, those have been offered this golden handshake and they have availed it. Similarly, in case of PIA, again, a sizable number of employees, they have availed their golden shake hand. So, both of these two and white elephants, I can see progress is happening. Now, what would help the government through legislation is, of course, taking care of certain legal requirement and certain legislative requirement that needs to be there to actually protect and safeguard those transactions. So that we have already seen in this country, if you remember that Shaukat Aziz, when he sent Pakistan Steel Mill employees back home, the People's Party government, they not only paid them arrears, but they also paid them, promoted them. So, you need to have some sort of laws that.
And that is also important, Dr. Saab, because you are talking about steel mills now. After 18th Amendment, who calls shots in such sectors? I understand with PIA, it might be easier that the center actually takes care of the matter. With steel mills and other projects, who is actually empowered to take decisions on privatization?
Well, in case of steel mills, it's still very much under federal control, and of course, in government they gave the land on lease, but it's very much federal government. They would have to pay the shots.
And the federal government doesn't need to make new laws to actually offload these assets.
They need to give them some sort of legal protection of their mayor so that those cannot be overturned by.
But that can be done with a simple majority, right?
I think in certain cases they need the nod of upper house.
Right. Fahim Sardar
Okay,
Sahab,
sorry,
let us
can
know.
I come here for a point?
Yeah, Abid Sahab, please go ahead.
Big Ben privatized, what was it? UBL was privatized, but government rolled it. Because it did half-hearted, PSM was never privatized by the mayor of, right? They did some half-hearted things. Once you do privatization, even if someone wants to roll it back, it will be, in the absence of law, even then it will be impossible. Because, you know, it's like the trade liberalization, and it could become so unpopular with the whole investor community, business community. No government will ever do it unless, of course, you know, some erotic guy telling this. So,
right. Abid Sahab, your voice seems to be freezing. It seems to be breaking. Let us fix that problem, and then I'm going to come back to you. Fahim Sardar Sahab, let us talk now about FATF. Now, what do you expect in coming days? Are we going to move out of the grey list and into the white list, or something else is happening? Have we conducted the reforms that were needed?
I think Pakistan has done a pretty good job, and this was lauded in the last plenary.
Yeah. But we were not 100% back then.
We never were. No country is.
Okay.
No country is.
Yeah, but you are the country that is caught in the grey list, in the net. So you have to actually wriggle out of it with an effort.
Right now, you're through with 21 out of 27, so 6 are left. So I mean, we're basically at the tail end of this whole process. I do see us.
You're talking about as of now, or during the last review? It was 21 out of 27.
Right now, it must be better than that.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is.
Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Yeah. So basically, we're heading towards the white list.
Okay.
Now, the more as you see a growth or trajectory, and one thing is commitment, which they look at, as they did in the case of Nigeria and various other countries. If you show commitment, that itself is a big thing. You see, it's not necessary that all of it is just completely against you. The fact of the matter is we were a little late in the game. This has been going on since 2010, and you know, we've taken our time. So we're heading towards the white list. We still have some way to go, and we still have to iron out certain details. And when you look at it from an operational perspective, we've done a lot. We just need to handle the political point, which I want to expand on. Right now, what India did with APG, the Asia Pacific Group, is that it used its markets, its massive markets, to basically, I would say, influence or buy votes.
Okay.
Now that's something.
And you're talking about a country that has been flagged by FinCEN, right? Because of its grey traffic or illegal transactions. You're talking about a country which is practically now ruled by a shadowy organization called RSS that has never shown its own sources of income. And that country actually decides what we are doing.
Precisely. And thank you for bringing that up, because I was going to go in that direction. And adding to what you just said, most of India's inflows are from grey areas.
Right.
Mauritius, for example, has massive investors coming into India, and when you go and investigate that investor, you see an apartment room which is locked and there's no furniture inside.
Right.
So basically, it's a big racket.
Right. You're talking about shell companies, right?
Shell companies, shell movement, shell pipes. It's the whole shebang. What I'm saying right now is
So
that
then FATF is basically political. You don't need to do reforms, you just have to need to lobby.
it's a reality. We have to take it seriously, and there's a lot of good stuff that we can get from it. That's
You understand, my job as an anchor is to be a contrarian. I have to oppose what you are saying, right? Doesn't mean I don't support.
if I can just get a word in right now, because I know you have to sum up. Operationally, we've done a lot of things. I'm happy to know that Pakistan has started to push the political front internationally as well.
Okay, no, right. Very quickly, sir, I'm told that we are left with three minutes. Dr. Salleri, your conclusion regarding FATF.
Well, I think actions we have taken, now we need to exert our influence on diplomatic side. Of course, we require 13 votes in order to get graduated from grey to white list. So far we had 3 votes, Turkey, Malaysia and China, who have been saving us from going blacklist. So I think it's a test of our Foreign Office now, whether they can mobilize another 10 members who could vote for us.
Right. And regarding reforms, we have done a lot, right, sir? Let me ask Abid Hassan Sahab, your take, sir.
And I mean, I kind of agree. Look, first, we have to wake up that these things are important for our own country, you know. And my take is FATF at one level is a very technical, professional stuff they do. The people who come and review are not some politicians belonging to RSS. They are centralizers from Indonesia. I mean, financial sector experts from Korea or so and so. Yes, when it comes to time voting, countries vote on it, on that particular review and evaluation. Of course, we have to do make sure, you know, or the voters, the voting countries have. But let's not hide behind this thing that you know.
Right. That is a point well made. I'm told that we have run out of time. Before I actually come to the conclusion, let me thank all the participants. Abid Qayyum Salleri sir, thank you.